D. Police. The police of the Individualistic Society are replaced with a division of the Populus militia, which is composed of the citizens of that locality. Too often, modern police watch the people instead of watching over them, not feeling the proper affinity towards their fellow man. With the citizens watching over themselves, and all being militia members, a high degree of camaraderie is present between the police and the policed, not to mention a higher degree of combat expertise. Each citizen is required to know everyone in a 10-acre radius. This awareness has many safety and preventative benefits. The initial introduction is organized each year by the captain of that locality. The small orientation takes place as a public gathering wherein each citizen is informed of the local geography and his neighbors. These 10-acre sectors, in some cases larger, then practice drills together on a regular scheduled basis, thereby generating a higher degree of camaraderie. Members of the practice drills, each residing at different geographical points, will thereby know a different group of people, together forming a network of camaraderie and high awareness, increasing the difficulty of suspect and criminal activity to go uncaught. This topic is explained in further detail on page 132 in the discussion of the military. Wardens. Wardens are senior active duty militiamen or women assigned or volunteered for the position. The wardens are the supervisors of the populous labor forces and represent the people's on-site interest in their tax dollars. The size of the labor force and the type of criminals composing it will determine the number of wardens assigned. The wardens are responsible for ensuring an acceptable level of performance by utilizing incentives and disciplinary measures no more severe than would be expected in a military boot camp. They are responsible for recording and reporting individual performance as well as issuing rewards to excelling laborers with court approval. The warden is a demanding position encompassing all the duties of military labor management and legal administration, while having to be constantly alert and on guard for protection of the citizen workers against any unsuspected uprising. E. Common laws. 1. Alimony. Divorce happens because many do not know what love is, and their lust too often produces children that must be cared for. Often it is true that either one or both of the parents are irresponsible, which causes the situation in the first place, and now threatens the livelihood of the children involved. It is then understandable for the society to get involved and oversee care of the children in the form of court-ordered alimony payments, so that the children do not end up on the streets or become prone to criminal behavior. However, presently there is a terrible flaw in the alimony system. It does not take into account which parent is irresponsible. For to give an individual money and assume that it will go to the children without a second court order defeats the entire purpose of the system. For this individual could be taking this money, meant for the children, and spending it on personal luxury or drugs while the children remain neglected. The first court order shall be the order of the parent with the least custody to pay a calculated amount whose minimum is based on the labor force minimum wage. For if the individual does not have a job or a profiting homestead to pay at least this minimum amount, this one will be placed into the labor force until a higher paying occupation is found. The second court order applies to the receiving parent, which orders that every cent be spent on the children for necessities, allotting only 15% for non-essentials such as toys or designer clothes, etc. These purchases must be proved by itemized receipts, which will be reviewed by a court representative every 60 days or at the request of the other parent. Furthermore, too often the existence of alimony, spousal support, splitting of assets, etc. actually encourages divorce, especially in situations where one parent has a high-paying occupation and the other is unemployed. By divorce, the unemployed can gain court-ordered access to the loved one's money and or possessions. Thus, the individualists make one final alteration to the system. The individual who initiates the divorce or separation forfeits their right to sue for any monetary or material gain unless it is proven that they are in a hostile relationship. This will hinder the temptation to forfeit love and children for the glistening embrace of cash, which the current structure of the system encourages. 2. Bankruptcy. The individualists dismantle private banks, fractional reserve, and usury. With usury, it is understandable how one may get buried beneath debt. And with fractional reserve, it is understandable how one may dispute a debt, being that a bank can demand payment of 10 times the amount it actually lent. With these practices, all debt becomes valid. Therefore, there is no bankruptcy in the individualistic society. This makes one think deeply before borrowing money. Any debt can be made forcibly payable if delinquent for 90 days. If the debtor has no material or energy reserves, the debtor must enter the labor force until the debt is repaid. This acts as further deterrent for not repaying a debt and encourages additional forethought before initially taking a debt. 3. Environmental. 1. Biodegradability. Until phased out, all synthetic materials must be fully biodegradable within 10 years when subjected to weather, such as wood it can keep indefinitely when cared for, but will quickly rot when left to weather. They also must be able to be easily recycled by on-site devices. Consumers will be recycling at their homesteads more often. See page 148. All liquid chemicals must have complete unambiguous disclosure of their ingredients. Obviously, these regulations hinder the use of such things as vinyl siding, plastic piping, and paints, and encourage the research into natural coatings, sealants, etc. 2. Waste. All unnatural products and materials will be phased out of the individualistic society. Until then, there will be no burning of unnatural, processed, or otherwise toxic materials such as plastic, rubber, paint, treated wood, treated paper, etc. There will be no burying or stockpiling such waste on one's own property, nor any waste of any kind expelled into the waters. 3. Forestry. For any tree cut down, one must plant the same tree twice the age of the tree cut. For example, if one cuts down a 10-year-old oak, one must plant 20 one-year-old oak saplings or 2 10-year-old oaks, or any like combination that meets the total age requirement. This does not apply to renewable timberlands where the trees cut are always replanted. Those practicing such activities must apply for a permit. 4. Foods. 1. The use of fertilizers must be disclosed on all foods, identifying the type of fertilizer and the method applied. 2. The use of artificial scents and flavors shall be banned. 3. All foods must have a complete unambiguous disclosure of their ingredients. 5. Immigration. Being that the individualistic society believes that a higher degree of knowledge and camaraderie discourages all criminal behavior and makes each individual an efficient contributor to society, the immigration requirements are altered. The immigrants must be duly prepared to enter into this society, for the lame, inept, and unprepared will find a most embarrassing challenge awaiting them. The entry requirements are: 1. One must have enough money to purchase 1 acre and enough money to pay for the 2-year entrance course. 2. Due to the individualistic high value of knowledge, the immigrant must take a 2-year course, which is a compressed version of all the knowledge taught to each citizen in the advanced public schools of the individualists. 3. Upon passing these tests, the immigrant must serve 2 years in the Populus military, just as every other individualistic citizen has done. If one can complete this 4-year challenge, one becomes a worthy citizen of the individualistic society and understands well their values. 6. The 6M Law. The individualistic society does not restrict knowledge except only in one condition: war. Being that the individualistic nation is utterly neutral, this means that the war has come to the individualist's soil. Only at this time does Lafke place a 6-month lag on pertinent military intelligence. Any other time, the citizens are fully informed of the bleeding edge of all technology. Some officials who disagree with such free information, even though such information was fully paid for by the citizens, will use the argument that the information will leak out to the enemy. This implies a fear in one's own capabilities. If one is confident in one's strategy and application of will, numbers and advanced technology will not matter. The U.S. Marines will testify to this fact. Furthermore, even in average societies, the one who invented the technology is already ahead of the one who is just now reading it secondhand. By the time full understanding and practical application of the new information is achieved, the ones who have invented it have already moved on to the next level. Therefore, withholding information from one's own people implies an entity separate from the people who desires an upper hand over the people as well as over exterior entities. Furthermore, with a doctrine of unrestricted knowledge, the rate of technology growth will be far faster than any other society who practices a system of knowledge restriction. Thus, even if an enemy receives the cutting-edge technology, by the time it is able to use it, an individualistic society will be far beyond that point, much farther than the average society mentioned above. 7. Voting. The act of electing a representative was because 1. People were deemed not educated enough to make proper decisions for themselves, and 2. People were assumed to not have enough time on their hands to properly assist in government affairs. Today, people have even less time and cannot even suitably research the individuals who are campaigning. The often limited number of candidates limits the possibility of choice, creating a scenario where no candidate may accurately represent a new direction the people wish to turn. Furthermore, the price of campaigning removes the common man from campaigning to represent his people, causing all representation to bias one class. For all these reasons, the individualists erect the GEP and its Populus Informer. With this system, representatives, as well as the above-mentioned restrictions, are practically made obsolete. All laws, bills, acts, etc. will be voted on by the entire nation. Voting on all law by all classes saves the law from perversion into a leveraging device to be used for the profit of corporations and benefit of the few. Ideally, there will never be any new laws passed in the individualistic society, as their simple doctrine should remain stable and unchanging for thousands of years. To ensure this check on corruption, it is made law that each citizen must read the Populus Informer and fill out the consensus form, else be fined $155. The reasoning, value, and importance of this action is taught in detail in their education system. Lastly, any representative position incorporated into the individualistic system, or any significant position of the four departments, is elected for specific term maximums. The full length of their terms is governed by the percentage of votes won, for example, a 4-year term. If the individual receives only 51% of the votes, the minimum term, the term is only 2 years long. But if the individual receives 100% of the votes, the term is then the full 4 years. This division can be calculated down to the day, and accurately reflects the people's wishes of who they desire to represent them.